The little girl's small fist hit the window of the most dangerous man in Chicago's car, and he opened the door. In a city where mercy is weakness and power is the only currency that matters, one man was about to learn that the strongest thing he'd ever do wasn't pulling a trigger. It was kneeling down to a child's level and saying 2 words: "You're safe." Welcome to Shadows of Redemption, where broken men find their humanity in the most unexpected places, and love is always a rebellion against darkness. If you believe even the coldest hearts deserve a second chance, hit that subscribe button and smash the like button to support stories that make you feel something real. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one and love hearing from you. Now let's see how one desperate knock on a car window changed 3 lives forever. The snow fell like shattered glass over Chicago's south side, each flake sharp enough to cut. The kind of cold that didn't just chill, it invaded, burrowed into bone, made breathing feel like swallowing razors. Kayle Morrison pressed her daughter closer to her chest, feeling the small body shiver violently through 2 layers of worn clothing. Ivy's face was buried in her mother's neck, her breath coming in small, terrified gasps that formed tiny clouds in the freezing air. "Mommy," the 4-year-old whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I'm scared." "I know, baby. I know." Kayle's own voice, cracked, her lips so numb she could barely form words. Her thin coat, the only one she owned, did nothing against the blizzard. She'd given Ivy her scarf an hour ago. Her fingers were white, bloodless. She couldn't feel her toes anymore. They'd been walking for 40 minutes since the bus dropped them at the wrong stop. The shelter was supposed to be 6 blocks away. But in this storm, 6 blocks might as well have been 6 miles. And Richard. God. Richard knew they'd gone to the shelter. Before. He had connections everywhere. Ex-cops always did. The alley behind her erupted with the sound of a car door slamming. Kayle's blood turned to ice colder than the wind. "Kayle!" Richard's voice cut through the storm, slurred but furious. "I know you're out here. You think you can take my kid and just disappear?" Ivy began to cry, the sound muffled against Kayle's shoulder. "Mommy, no. No. Shh, baby, shh." Kayle stumbled forward, her vision blurring with snow and tears. Her legs were giving out. She'd been working double shifts for 3 weeks, barely eating so Ivy could. Now her body was shutting down, right when she needed it most. Ahead, through the white curtain of snow, she saw it. A black Mercedes idling at the curb, engine purring like some predatory animal. Tinted windows, expensive, the kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Behind her, Richard's footsteps crunched closer. Kayle didn't think. Couldn't think. She ran. Her fist hit the rear window 3 times. Desperate. Graceless. "Please." Her voice was raw. "Please, someone." The window rolled down. Kayle found herself staring at a man who looked like he'd been carved from shadows and cold marble. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, a face that gave away nothing. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than she'd made in the last 6 months. A watch glinted on his wrist. Platinum, heavy. The kind that said, "I own this city." For a second, she thought he'd tell her to get lost. Men like him didn't help people like her. But then his gaze dropped to Ivy. The little girl had lifted her head from Kayle's shoulder, her brown curls plastered to her tear-streaked face, her big eyes wide with terror. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Daddy's coming to hurt us again," Ivy whispered, her small voice breaking. "Can we hide in your car, please? Just for a little bit?" The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, something dark and old and buried. "Get in," he said, his voice low and cold as the storm around them. Kayle hesitated for half a heartbeat, every instinct screaming that getting into a car with a stranger was madness. But then she heard Richard shouting her name again, closer now, and she made her choice. She yanked the door open and fell into the back seat with Ivy still clutched to her chest. The warmth hit her like a physical force. Leather seats, heated. The air smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Gunpowder. Maybe. She didn't care. It was warm. Ivy was safe. The man leaned forward and spoke to someone in the front seat, a driver Kayle hadn't even registered. Drive. Sir, drive. The car pulled away from the curb just as Richard burst onto the sidewalk, his face twisted with rage. He lunged for the car, but they were already moving, smooth and fast, swallowed by the storm within seconds. Kayle pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. Ivy was crying quietly, her small body still trembling. Kayle wrapped both arms around her, rocking her gently, murmuring nonsense words that meant nothing except, "You're safe. You're safe. You're safe." The man in the front didn't turn around. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, one hand resting on his knee. The other hand, Kayle noticed, was clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Where do you need to go?" he said. Not a question. A command for information. Kayle swallowed hard. The women's shelter on hike. Ashland, if you could just drop us. He'll find you there. Her blood went cold again. What? The man finally turned, just enough that she could see his profile. Hard, unreadable. Your ex? He knows you go there. Men like him always know. How do you? I know men like him. His voice was flat. You go back to that shelter, he'll be waiting. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but he'll be there. Kayle's throat tightened. I don't have anywhere else. Silence filled the car, broken only by Ivy's soft whimpers and the sound of the heater running. The man stared at her in the rearview mirror, and Kayle forced herself to meet his gaze. He had the coldest eyes she'd ever seen, like looking into deep water in the middle of winter. But beneath that cold, something flickered, something raw. You'll stay at my place tonight, he said finally. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. I can't, Kayle started, but he cut her off. It's not a favor, it's a fact. He turned back to face forward. You want to argue with me? Save it for when your daughter isn't freezing to death in my back seat. Kayle looked down at Ivy, whose lips were faintly blue, her small hands like ice even inside the warm car. Shame and gratitude and terror all twisted together in her chest, making it hard to breathe. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Thank you. The man didn't respond. They drove in silence through the storm, the city lights blurred and distant, and Kayle held her daughter and wondered what kind of man she'd just trusted with their lives. She didn't know his name. She didn't know where they were going. All she knew was that for the first time in 3 years, someone had opened a door instead of slamming it in her face, and that terrified her almost as much as Richard did. The car turned onto a private road, trees bending under the weight of snow on either side, and Kayle caught a glimpse of iron gates sliding open ahead. A mansion loomed in the distance, all sharp angles and warm, light spilling from enormous windows. Ivy had stopped crying. She'd gone quiet, her eyes half closed, exhaustion finally winning over fear. Who are you? Kayle asked softly. The man glanced at her in the mirror one more time. Someone who doesn't let little girls freeze to death, he said. It wasn't an answer, but somehow, for tonight, it was enough. The mansion was warm in a way Kayle had almost forgotten existed. Not the artificial, rattling heat of the radiator in their old apartment that, clanked and hissed and barely worked. Not the temporary warmth of the shelter's crowded sleeping room where too many bodies pressed together made the air thick and stale. This was enveloping, soft, the kind of warmth that seeped into your skin and made your muscles unclench for the first time in months. Kayle stood in the marble entryway, dripping melted snow onto floors that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned, and felt completely, utterly out of place. Ivy clung to her neck, half asleep now, her small body finally starting to relax. Kayle could feel her daughter's heartbeat against her chest. Too fast still, but slowing. The terror easing, bit by bit. The man, she still didn't know his name, spoke quietly to someone Kayle hadn't noticed. A woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back neatly, wearing simple black slacks and a cardigan. A housekeeper, maybe. Draw a bath. Warm, not hot. Get the guest room ready, the one on the east wing with the attached nursery. And bring food. Something a kid will actually eat. The woman nodded without question and disappeared up a curved staircase that looked like something from a movie. The man turned to Kayle. Up close, under the soft light of the chandelier, she could see him more clearly. Late 30s, maybe. Dark hair, perfectly cut. A face that would have been handsome if it weren't so hard. Jaw like carved stone. Eyes that gave away nothing. He'd removed his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and, Kayle's breath caught, a tattoo, dark ink disappearing under the fabric. "You need medical attention?" he asked. Kayle blinked. "What?" "You're limping. Your hands are frostbitten. You haven't eaten in how long?" "I'm fine." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Don't lie to me." It should have sounded threatening. Maybe it was, but Kayle was too exhausted to care. "I'm fine," she repeated, quieter. "Ivy needs to eat. She needs to sleep somewhere safe. That's all that matters." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, barely perceptible, he nodded. "Bathroom's upstairs. Maria's running a bath. Get her clean, get her warm. I'll have clothes brought up." "I don't need—" "You're wearing a coat with a hole in the shoulder and boots that are held together with duct tape." His voice was flat, factual. "You need clothes." Kayle's face burned. She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't a charity case, that she'd managed on her own this long. But Ivy shifted against her shoulder, and Kayle felt the dampness of her daughter's clothes, smelled the sour scent of fear sweat, and too many days without proper washing. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." He turned away, already pulling out his phone, dismissing her. "Maria will show you the room." Kayle climbed the stairs, each step an effort. Her legs felt like lead. The housekeeper, Maria, waited at the top, her expression kind, but carefully neutral. "This way, dear." The guest room was bigger than Kayle's entire old apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked impossibly soft. Through an open doorway, Kayle could see a smaller room, the nursery, with a child-sized bed already made up, stuffed animals arranged carefully on the pillows. The bathroom was all white marble and gold fixtures. Steam rose from the tub, and the scent of lavender filled the air. Kayle set Ivy down carefully. The little girl swayed, her eyes heavy. "Come on, baby. Let's get you clean." Undressing, Ivy broke something inside Kayle's chest. The bruises on her daughter's arms, faded now but still visible, from the last time Richard had grabbed her. The way Ivy's ribs showed too prominently, sharp little ridges under pale skin. She'd been feeding her daughter everything she could, but it was never enough. Never enough. Ivy didn't protest when Kayle lowered her into the warm water. She just sighed, a sound of pure relief, and let her head fall back. "Mommy?" she murmured. "Yeah, baby? Is the scary man gonna hurt us?" Kayle's hand stilled in Ivy's hair. "What scary man?" "The one with the big car." "No, honey. No, he's helping us." "Why?" Kayle didn't have an answer for that. She didn't understand it herself. Men like him, men with power and money and cold eyes, didn't help people like her. Not without wanting something in return. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "But for tonight, we're safe here." Ivy seemed to accept that. She let Kayle wash her hair, scrub the grime from under her fingernails, rinse the fear from her small body. By the time Kayle lifted her out and wrapped her in the softest towel she'd ever touched, Ivy was nearly asleep on her feet. Maria had left clothes on the bed. For Ivy, fleece pajamas covered in stars, impossibly soft. For Kayle, leggings, a long sweater, undergarments still in packaging. Everything. Simple, practical, and she checked the tags with shaking hands, her exact size. How did he... She didn't let herself finish the thought. Once Ivy was dressed and tucked into the small bed in the nursery, Kayle stood in the doorway and just watched her daughter sleep. Really sleep. Not the fitful, nightmare-interrupted sleep of the shelter, where Ivy woke up screaming 3 times a night. Not the terrified half-sleep of the nights they'd spent in the car, listening for Richard's footsteps. This was deep. Peaceful. Ivy's mouth was slightly open. One small hand curled around a stuffed rabbit someone had left on the pillow. Kayle pressed her fist to her mouth and let herself cry for the first time in weeks. Silent, shaking sobs that she muffled against her own hand so Ivy wouldn't hear. She'll be safe here. Kayle spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The man stood in the hallway, one shoulder against the doorframe, watching her with those unreadable dark eyes. He'd changed, now wearing black slacks and a plain black t-shirt that did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders or the danger written into every line of his body. "I didn't hear you," Kayle managed, her voice rough. "I know." He didn't apologize. "There's food downstairs. You should eat." "I'm not hungry." "You're a terrible liar." Kayle's jaw tightened. "I said I'm not. Your hands are shaking. You can barely stand. When's the last time you ate a full meal?" She wanted to lie again, but her body betrayed her. Her stomach growled, loud in the quiet hallway. His expression didn't change, but she saw it again. That flicker of something beneath the ice. "Downstairs," he repeated. "Now." It should have made her angry, being ordered around like a child. But she was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending she was okay when she was falling apart. "Fine," she whispered. She followed him down the stairs, through hallways lined with art that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, into a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. All stainless steel and granite, with an island in the center where someone had laid out food. Soup, bread, a salad. Nothing fancy, but it smelled like heaven. Kayle sat at the island and forced herself to eat slowly, even though every instinct screamed at her to devour everything in sight. The man, she really needed to know his name, sat across from her, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching her with that same steady, unnerving intensity. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Julian." "Julian what?" "Just Julian." Kayle set down her spoon. "You know my name. You know I have a daughter. You know about Richard. I think I deserve more than just Julian." Something that might have been amusement crossed his face, there and gone in a heartbeat. Julian Rice. The name hit her like cold water. Julian Rice. Everyone in Chicago knew that name, or rather, everyone knew what it meant. Power, violence, control. The Rice family ran half the South Side, protection rackets, construction contracts that weren't quite legal, Nightclubs where drugs changed hands in back rooms. The kind of man her mother would have told her to run from. The kind of man who'd just saved her daughter's life. "You're afraid," Julian said. Not a question. "Should I be?" He took a slow sip of his whiskey, considering. "Of me? Probably. That's not reassuring. It's honest." He set the glass down with a soft clink. "I'm not a good man, Kayle. I do things that would make you sick. I've hurt people, killed people. I'll do it again." Her stomach turned cold, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "But I don't hurt women," he continued, his voice low and hard. "And I sure as hell don't hurt kids. That's a line I don't cross. Ever." "Why?" The question hung between them, heavy. Julian's jaw tightened. For the first time, she saw something crack in his carefully controlled expression. Something raw and old and full of pain. "Because someone should have protected the people I loved," he said quietly, "and no one did." Before Kayle could respond, he stood, ending the conversation. "You'll stay here until we figure out what to do about your ex. There are rules. You don't leave without telling me. You don't talk to anyone about where you are. And you don't go into the West Wing. That's business, and you don't want any part of it." Kayle nodded slowly, her mind spinning. "Your room is upstairs. Maria will get you. Anything you need. If Ivy wakes up scared, there's an intercom by the bed. Press the button, someone will come." "Julian." He paused in the doorway, his back to her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you." He didn't turn around. "Get some sleep, Kayle. Tomorrow, we'll talk about keeping you both alive." Then he was gone, and Kayle was alone in the enormous kitchen, surrounded by warmth and safety and a terror she couldn't name. Because Julian, race was dangerous, and she'd just put herself and her daughter completely in his hands. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Ivy bloomed like a flower finally given water and sun. The terror that had lived in her eyes since Richard's last rampage began to fade, replaced by cautious curiosity. She explored the mansion in small increments. First just the nursery, then the hallway. Then, on the third morning, the grand living room where morning light poured through floor to ceiling. Windows. Kayle watched her daughter discover what it felt like to be a child again, to play without fear, to laugh without immediately looking over her shoulder. It was beautiful. It was unbearable. Because this wasn't theirs. This safety, this warmth, this peace. It was borrowed. Temporary. Julian Rice was letting them stay. But he wasn't offering them a life, just a shelter from the storm. And Kayle knew better than to mistake temporary kindness for something more. She saw Julian in fragments. He was gone most of the time. "Business," Maria said with a careful smile that revealed nothing. But sometimes Kayle would catch glimpses. Julian in the study at midnight, surrounded by papers and laptop screens, his face illuminated by cold blue light. Julian in the gym that took up half the basement, hitting a punching bag with mechanical precision, each strike landing with a sound like bones breaking. Julian standing at the window of the West Wing, staring out at the snow-covered grounds, his expression so distant, he looked like a stranger even to himself. He never spoke to her unless necessary. Quick, clipped exchanges about Ivy's needs or Richard's movements. Apparently, Julian had people watching her ex, making sure he stayed away from the house. It should have comforted her. Instead, it reminded her how deep she was in a world she didn't understand. But with Ivy, Julian was different. Kayle noticed it on the second night, when Ivy woke screaming from a nightmare. Kayle had been halfway down the hall when she saw him there first, kneeling beside Ivy's small bed, his large hand gentle on her daughter's back. "Hey," he'd said softly. "You're okay. Just a bad dream. Ivy had grabbed his shirt, small fists clenching the fabric. The monster was back. There's no monster here. How do you know? Because I'm scarier than any monster. He'd said it like a fact. And I don't let anything hurt kids. That's a rule. Ivy had stared at him with those big brown eyes, processing. Then, "You're not scary, Mr. Julian." Something had crossed his face. Surprise, maybe. Pain. He'd pulled back slightly, as if her words had burned him. "Go back to sleep," he'd murmured. "You're safe." Kayle had stepped back into the shadows before either of them saw her, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Now, on the third afternoon, she found Ivy in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with crayons and paper spread around her. Julian sat in a leather chair nearby, laptop open, working, but his attention kept drifting to the little girl, watching her draw with an expression Kayle couldn't name. "Mr. Julian?" Ivy said, not looking up from her drawing. "Hmm? Do you got a little girl?" His hands stilled on the keyboard. "No." "How come?" "Just don't." Ivy considered this, then held up her drawing. "I made you a picture." Julian set the laptop aside and took the paper carefully, like it was something fragile. Kayle moved closer, staying in the doorway where they couldn't see her. The drawing was simple. Stick figures. A big one labeled Mr. Julian, a medium one labeled Mommy, and a small one labeled Me. They were holding hands. Above them, Ivy had drawn a yellow sun and the word safe in wobbly letters. Julian stared at the picture for a long time. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "This is good," he said finally, his voice rough. "Thank you." "You can keep it." "I will." Ivy beamed, then went back to her crayons. Julian set the picture on the side table with a care that made Kayle's throat ache. She retreated before he could notice her, her chest tight with emotions she didn't want to name. Gratitude, fear, and something else. Something dangerous that whispered, what if this could be real? That evening, Ivy fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of exploration. Kayle tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and found herself restless, unable to settle. The mansion was too big, too quiet. Every shadow felt like it was hiding something. She wandered downstairs, not sure what she was looking for, and found Julian in the study. The door was half open, warm light spilling into the dark hallway. He sat at his desk, a glass of whiskey in one hand, staring at something Kayle couldn't see. She should have walked away, should have left him to his privacy. Instead, she knocked softly on the doorframe. He looked up, and for just a second, she saw exhaustion written across his face. Then the mask snapped back into place. "Ivy okay?" "Sleeping." Kayle stepped inside, her arms wrapped around herself. "I wanted to, I don't know, say thank you again." "You already did." "I know, but I'm not good at accepting help." She tried to smile. "Feels like I owe you something." "You don't owe me anything. That's not how the world works. It's how my world works." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You think I'm keeping score, waiting for you to pay me back? Aren't you?" His expression darkened. "I'm not your ex-husband, Kayle. I don't do kindness with strings attached." The words were harsh, but something in his tone made them feel like a promise. Kayle moved further into the room, drawn by a curiosity she couldn't explain. Her eyes caught on a photograph on the shelf behind his desk. The only personal item in the entire space. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair and a gap-toothed smile. She stood next to a woman who looked like an older version of Julian, same sharp features, same intense eyes. "Who is that?" Kayle asked softly. Julian's entire body went rigid. No one. Julian! I said it's no one. His voice was ice. But Kayle had spent 3 years reading the danger in Richard's voice, learning when to push and when to retreat. This wasn't anger, it was pain. She took a risk. She looks like you. For a long moment, Julian didn't respond. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. My sister, Sophia. Past tense. I'm sorry, Kayle whispered. Julian drained his whiskey in one swallow and set the glass down with controlled precision. She was 8 when our stepfather put her in the hospital. I was 16. Thought I could protect her. His laugh was bitter, hollow. I was wrong. Julian. She died 3 days later. Internal bleeding they didn't catch in time. He finally looked at Kayle, and his eyes were full of something raw and bleeding and ancient. I swore that day I'd never let it happen again. Never stand by while a man hurt someone who couldn't fight back. Understanding crashed over Kayle like a wave. That's why you stopped for us. That's why I stopped for anyone. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, putting distance between them. Ivy. She looks like Sophia did at that age. Same eyes, same way of trusting people she shouldn't trust. You're not someone she shouldn't trust. Yes, I am. He turned back to her, and the intensity in his gaze pinned her in place. I kill people, Kayle. I run an empire built on fear. Everything I touch turns to ash eventually. She drew you a picture today, Kayle said softly. Called you Mr. Julian and said you're not scary. She feels safe with you. She's 4. She doesn't know better. She's 4 and she's been through hell. She knows exactly what real danger feels like. Kayle took a step closer. You're not what you think you are. And what do I think I am? A monster. The word hung between them. Julian's expression shuddered. You should go to bed. I'm not afraid of you. Then you're stupid. Maybe. Kayle held her ground. Or maybe I can see what you don't want anyone to see. And what's that? That you're just as broken as the rest of us. You just hide it better. For a second, she thought he might yell, might throw her out of the room, might prove her wrong by showing her exactly how dangerous he could be. Instead, his shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. He looked away. Get some sleep, Kayle, he said, his voice empty. Tomorrow I'm putting guards on the house. Your ex has been asking questions. He's getting close. Fear spiked through her chest, but underneath it was something else. A strange, terrifying certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Okay, she whispered. She left him there, alone in the study with his ghosts, and climbed the stairs to check on Ivy one more time before bed. Her daughter slept peacefully, the stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms, her breathing deep and even. And on the nightstand, carefully placed where Ivy could see it in the morning, was the picture she'd drawn. Julian had returned it. But Kayle noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the corner, in handwriting too controlled to be anything but deliberate, someone had written 2 words. Thank you. The nightmares came back on the 4th night. Ivy's screams tore through the quiet mansion like shattered glass, high and terrified, and so young. Kayle bolted from sleep, her heart already racing, muscle memory, from 1,000 nights just like this one. She ran to the nursery, but Julian was already there. He knelt beside Ivy's bed, his large frame somehow gentle, one hand hovering over the little girl's shoulder like he was afraid to touch her. Ivy thrashed against the blankets, her face twisted in terror, small fists beating the air. Daddy, no. Daddy, please don't hurt Mommy. Please. Kayle's chest cracked open. She pushed past Julian and gathered Ivy into her arms, holding her, daughter tight while the little body convulsed with sobs. Shh, baby, shh. It's okay. It was just a dream. Mommy's right here. But Ivy couldn't hear her. She was trapped somewhere else, somewhere dark, reliving the night Richard had. Kayle forced the memory down. Not now. Ivy, sweetheart, look at me. She cupped her daughter's face, making eye contact. You're safe. We're safe. He's not here. Slowly, so slowly, Ivy's eyes focused. Her breathing hitched, gasped, then began to even out. She looked at Kayle, then past her to where Julian still knelt, frozen. Mr. Julian? I'm here. His voice was gentler than Kayle had ever heard it. Ivy reached out one small hand. Julian stared at it like he didn't know what to do. Then carefully he took it. I had the bad dream again, Ivy whispered. Daddy was hurting Mommy real bad and I couldn't stop him and... That's not happening anymore, Julian said. Firm. Certain. Your dad isn't coming here. I won't let him. You promise? Kayle opened her mouth to say, don't make promises you can't keep. But Julian cut her off. I promise. The words landed like an oath. Ivy studied him with those two old eyes, then nodded. She burrowed back into Kayle's arms, her grip still tight on Julian's hand. Can you stay? She mumbled, already half asleep again. Just till I sleep? Kayle expected him to make an excuse, to leave, to retreat back into the cold distance he wore like armor. Instead, Julian nodded. Yeah, I'll stay. He settled into the chair beside the bed, his presence solid and steady, and Kayle sang softly until Ivy's breathing deepened, and her small hand finally went slack. Kayle carefully extracted herself and stood, her legs shaking with adrenaline crash. Julian remained seated, watching Ivy sleep like he was memorizing her face. You okay? Kayle whispered. Fine. He wasn't. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. Julian, she shouldn't have to dream about shit like that, he said, his voice low and rough. No kid should know what it feels like to watch their mother get beaten. Kayle's throat closed. I tried to protect her. I tried to leave so many times, but Richard always found us, and the cops wouldn't help because he was a cop, and... I know. Julian finally looked up at her, and the fury in his eyes stole her breath. Not fury at her. Fury for her. I know exactly how the system fails women like you. I've seen it 100 times. Then you know there was no way out. There's always a way out. He stood, moving closer, and Kayle had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. You just need someone willing to burn the right bridges. A shiver ran down her spine. What does that mean? It means your ex is a problem, and I solve problems. Julian, if you do something... I already did something. I took you in. His expression was hard, unreadable. Everything else is just cleanup. Kayle should have been horrified, should have argued, should have told him. Violence wasn't the answer. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of looking over her shoulder, of watching her daughter fall apart piece by piece, of knowing Richard would never stop hunting them. I don't want you to kill him, she said quietly. Julian's eyebrow lifted slightly. Didn't say I would. But you were thinking it. Thinking and doing are different things. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get some sleep, Kayle. I'll have someone watch the hallway tonight. You don't have to. I know. He left before she could thank him. Kayle stood in the nursery for a long time, watching Ivy sleep, wondering what kind of man Julian Rice really was beneath all the violence and control. A man who knelt beside a little girl's bed and promised to keep her safe. A man who looked at a child's nightmare and saw his own past. A man who was probably more dangerous than Richard could ever be. But somehow, impossibly, felt safer. The next morning, Kayle woke to find Ivy, already awake, sitting at the kitchen island with a plate of pancakes and chocolate milk. Maria bustled around, humming softly, and Julian sat across from Ivy with coffee and a tablet, working. It looked domestic, normal. It was a lie, but God, it was a beautiful one. "Mommy!" Ivy's face lit up. "Mr. Julian made pancakes." Kayle glanced at Julian, who didn't look up from his tablet. "Maria made pancakes." "You helped," Ivy insisted. "I poured the batter. That's not helping. That's basic motor function." Ivy giggled, and the sound was so pure Kayle's chest ached. She poured herself coffee and sat down, trying to ignore how right this felt. How easy it would be to pretend this was their life. "We need to talk," Julian said, his eyes still on his screen. Kayle's stomach tightened. "About?" "Your ex. He's been making moves, asking questions, calling in favors. He's got friends in the police department and some connections to the Volkov family." "The who?" Julian finally looked up. "Russian mob. They run the north side. We have an arrangement. Mostly we stay out of each other's way. Mostly. There's tension right now. Territory disputes. And Richard's been talking to some of their lower-level guys, offering information about my operations in exchange for help finding you." Cold fear washed over Kayle. "He's working with the mob?" "He's desperate." Julian set the tablet down. "Desperate men make stupid choices, and stupid choices give me leverage." "What are you going to do?" "What I do best. Apply pressure until he backs off." "And if he doesn't?" Julian's expression went cold, empty. "Then I apply more pressure." Kayle looked at Ivy, who was happily demolishing her pancakes, oblivious to the conversation happening above her head. "I don't want her growing up knowing her father died because of—" "He's not going to die." Julian's voice was flat. "I don't kill people because it's convenient. I kill them because they've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." "What line?" "Touch my family, threaten my business, hurt kids." He met her gaze. "Richard's done one of those things. If he does another, the decision makes itself." "We're not your family," Kayle said quietly. Something flickered in Julian's eyes. "No, but you're under my protection. That makes you mine." The word mine should have felt possessive, wrong. Instead, it felt like safety. Kayle looked away, her pulse racing. "Mommy, can I go play?" Ivy asked, syrup on her chin. "Yeah, baby. Stay where Maria can see you, okay?" Ivy nodded and scrambled down from her chair, already running toward the living room. Alone with Julian, the kitchen felt smaller, intimate. "I need to ask you something," Kayle said. "Go ahead." "Why do you really do this? Help women and kids, I mean. Is it just about your sister?" Julian's jaw tightened. He stood, carrying his coffee to the window, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. "When Sophia died," he said slowly, "I was 16, not old enough to do anything, not young enough to be helpless, just stuck. I watched that piece of shit walk away without consequences, because my mother was too scared to press charges, and the system didn't give a damn about some poor kid from the South Side." He turned back to her, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it hurt to look at. "I swore I'd never be that powerless again. Never watch someone suffer and do nothing." His voice dropped. "So yeah, it's about Sophia, but it's also about every other Sophia out there. Every woman who thinks she has to choose between staying and dying. Every kid who learns what fear tastes like before they learn to read." Kayle stood, moving closer before she could stop herself. "You're not powerless anymore. No. Now I'm the thing people should be afraid of." He laughed, bitter. "Funny how that works." "You're not what you think you are," she whispered. "You keep saying that. Doesn't make it true. Ivy thinks you're a hero. Ivy's 4. She thinks cartoons are real." "I think you're a hero?" The words hung between them, dangerous and true. Julian stared at her, something shifting behind his carefully controlled expression. "You don't know what I've done, Kayle. I know what you're doing now. And when you find out the rest, when you see the monster everyone else sees..." Kayle took a breath. "Then I'll deal with it. But right now, you're the reason my daughter is laughing again. That's all that matters." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air felt charged, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shuddered. "I have to go. Business." "Okay." He hesitated then. "Stay inside today. Don't answer the door for anyone except Maria or my men." "Is something wrong?" "Just a precaution." He grabbed his jacket from the chair. "I'll be back tonight." He was almost out the door when Kayle called after him. "Julian?" He stopped. "Be careful." He looked back at her, and, for just a second, something soft crossed his face. "Always am." Then he was gone, and Kayle was left standing in the warm kitchen, her heart doing something complicated and terrifying in her chest. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Kayle jerked awake, disoriented, her heart already pounding from some half-remembered nightmare. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the heating system and footsteps. Fast. Multiple people moving through the hallway outside her room. She threw off the covers and ran to Ivy's room, her instincts screaming danger, danger, danger. Ivy was still asleep, curled around her stuffed rabbit, peaceful and unaware. Kayle's hand was on her daughter's shoulder when Julian appeared in the doorway. He wore all black, tactical pants, a fitted shirt that showed the shoulder holster strapped across his chest. His face was stone. "Get dressed. Both of you. Now." Terror spiked through her veins. "What's happening?" "Richard found the house." The words punched the air from her lungs. "How? Doesn't matter. He's got Volkov backing him, and they're making a move tonight." Julian's voice was clipped, controlled, but she could see the fury burning beneath the surface. "I'm getting you out of here." "Where?" "Safe house across town. Maria's already there. You'll stay until this is handled." Kayle's hands shook as she woke Ivy, who whimpered in confusion. "Mommy?" "We're going on a little trip, baby. It's okay." "Where's Mr. Julian?" "Right here," Julian said, from the doorway. His voice softened fractionally. "Hey, kiddo. You remember how I said I'd keep you safe?" Ivy nodded, her eyes wide. "That's what we're doing now. So I need you to be really brave and really quiet, okay?" "Okay," Ivy whispered. 10 minutes later, they were in Julian's car, driving through the dark Chicago streets with 2 additional vehicles flanking them. Guards, Kayle realized. Armed men whose faces she couldn't see. Ivy had fallen back asleep in her arms, but Kayle was wired, her mind spinning. "How did he find us?" she asked quietly. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Someone talked. One of Volkov's guys saw Maria at the market, followed her back. I didn't think they'd move this fast." "What are you going to do?" "End this." The certainty in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. They arrived at the safe house, a modest apartment in a nondescript building, nothing like the mansion. Maria met them at the door, her face tight with worry, and took Ivy without a word. Kayle turned to Julian, suddenly desperate. "Don't go." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something cracked in his expression. "I have to." "Why?" "Because if I don't handle this now, Tonight, Richard will keep coming. He'll use Volkov's resources. He'll track you down, and next time I might not be there to stop him. So, you're going to... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm going to have a conversation. Julian's jaw tightened. What happens after depends on whether he listens. Julian, he hurt you. He hurt her. Julian's voice dropped to something dark and dangerous. You think I'm letting him walk away from that? I think you're better than this. No. He stepped closer, and Kayle's breath caught. I'm exactly this. This is who I am, Kayle. I'm the man who does the ugly things so people like you don't have to. I don't want you to become a monster for me. I was already a monster. I'm just choosing what I use it for. Before she could respond, he turned and headed for the door. Julian, wait. He paused, his back to her. Come back, she whispered. Please. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I will. And then he was gone. The hours crawled by like years. Kayle sat on the couch in the safe house, Ivy asleep against her side, Maria moving quietly in the kitchen making tea no one would drink. The TV was on, muted, showing the early morning news. Every car that passed made Kayle flinch. Every sound was a threat. What was Julian doing right now? Was he hurt? Was he... The thought cut off, too terrible to complete. At 6:13 a.m., Kayle's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her hand shook as she opened the message. It's done. Stay there. I'll come get you in a few hours. No details. No explanation. But he was alive. Kayle pressed her hand over her mouth, trying not to cry, trying not to wake Ivy, trying not to think about what "it's done" meant. 3 hours later, Julian walked through the door. He looked exhausted. There was blood on his shirt, just a little at the collar. His knuckles were bruised, but he was whole, alive. Kayle stood so fast she nearly woke Ivy. Are you okay? Fine. That's blood. Not mine. He moved past her to the kitchen, poured himself water, drank it in one long swallow. His hands were steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Julian, what happened? He set the glass down carefully. Richard's in the hospital. Broken ribs, fractured jaw, internal bruising. He'll live. I didn't kill him. Julian's voice was flat. Wanted to. Would have been easier. But you asked me not to. Kayle's chest tightened. So what now? Now he knows what happens if he comes near you again. And Volkov knows I'm not someone he wants to cross. Julian finally looked at her, and his eyes were cold, empty. It's over. Just like that. Just like that. She should have felt relieved, should have felt safe. Instead, she felt sick. How bad did you hurt him? Bad enough that he won't forget. Julian. You want to know exactly what I did? His voice turned sharp. You want me to describe how I made him beg? How I broke bones until he swore on his mother's grave he'd never look for you again? Kayle flinched. Julian's expression shuddered. That's what I thought. That's not fair. This is who I am, Kayle. He gestured to himself, to the blood, to the violence written into every line of his body. I'm not the hero from Ivy's drawings. I'm the thing nightmares are made of. And if you can't handle that, I can handle it, Kayle interrupted. Her voice shook, but she held her ground. I can handle knowing you hurt him. I can handle knowing you're dangerous. What I can't handle is you shutting me out like I'm too fragile to exist in your world. Julian stared at her, something shifting in his expression. I've survived 3 years of hell, Kayle continued, her voice stronger now. I've been beaten, terrorized, hunted. I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting from reality. I know exactly what you are. And I'm standing here anyway. Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Then Julian moved. 3 steps, and he was in front of her, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You should be afraid of me," he said roughly. "I know. You should take Ivy and run." "I know. But you're not going to." "No." Kayle's heart hammered against her ribs. "Because you're the first person who's ever actually kept us safe. And I trust you, even when I probably shouldn't." Julian's jaw clenched. For a second, she thought he might kiss her, thought he might close the distance, and instead he pulled back, dropping his hand. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "We'll go back to the house this afternoon." "Julian, please, Kayle, just give me a minute." She nodded, understanding flooding through her. He was afraid, not of Richard, not of Volkov, but of this, of what was building between them, of what it would cost if he let himself feel it. They returned to the mansion that evening. Ivy chattered the whole way, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults in the car. She talked about the pancakes Maria had promised for breakfast, about the book she wanted Julian to read to her, about how she'd drawn another picture, this one of all 3 of them plus a dog. "We don't have a dog," Julian said, his first words in an hour. "We could get one." Ivy bounced in her car seat. "A big one. That protects people." Kayle caught Julian's eye in the rearview mirror. Something soft crossed his face, there and gone in a heartbeat. "Maybe," he said. Ivy squealed with delight, and Kaylee's chest ached with how normal this felt. How much it felt like a family. How much it wasn't. The next 3 days settled into an uneasy rhythm. Julian was different. Quieter. He worked from home more, stationed himself in the living room where he could see Ivy playing, like he was afraid to let her out of his sight. He'd look up from his laptop and just watch her, his expression unreadable. Kayle caught him one evening standing in the doorway of the West Wing, the area she wasn't supposed to enter. His hand was on the doorknob, his body rigid, like he was fighting himself. "Julian?" she called softly. He turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. Raw, vulnerable, lost. "You okay?" "Yeah." He cleared his throat, stepped away from the door. "Yeah, I'm fine." He wasn't. She could see it in the way he moved, the way he held himself apart, the way he looked at Ivy like she was something precious he wasn't allowed to touch. That night, after Ivy was asleep, Kayle found Julian on the back terrace despite the cold. He stood at the railing, staring out at the snow-covered grounds, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're going to freeze," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "Can't feel it." Kayle moved closer until she was standing beside him. Their shoulders almost touched. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "About what?" "About whatever's eating you alive." Julian's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, "The West Wing. That's where Sophia's room is." Kayle's heart clenched. "You kept it?" "Haven't opened the door in 20 years. His voice was flat, emotionless in a way that told her it was anything but. "Everything's still there. Her clothes, her toys, the bed I carried her to the night she—" He cut himself off, taking a long drink. "Julian, Ivy laughs like her," he continued, still not looking at Kayle. "Same pitch, same joy. And every time I hear it, I think about how Sophia never got to grow up, never got to be safe, never got to just be. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it?" He finally turned to her. and the agony in his eyes stole her breath. I was there. I knew what he was doing to her, to my mother, and I did nothing. You were 16. I was old enough to know better, old enough to fight back, but I was scared, and I waited, and by the time I decided to act, it was too late. Kayle's throat burned with unshed tears. You were a child. I was a coward. No. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You were a kid in an impossible situation. You can't blame yourself for... I can blame myself for everything after. Julian's voice turned hard. For becoming exactly like him. For using violence to solve problems. For building an empire on fear and pain. You're nothing like him. I break people, Kayle. I ruin lives. That's what I do. You saved us, she said fiercely. You gave Ivy her childhood back. You gave me hope when I thought there was none left. That's what you do. Julian stared at her, something cracking in his carefully constructed walls. I don't know how to be what you think I am, he whispered. You already are. If I let myself care... His voice broke. If I let you and Ivy in, and something happens, nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. He pulled away from her, his movements jerky, desperate. Richard's not the only threat. I have enemies, Kayle. Real ones. People who would hurt you just to get to me. Then we'll deal with it. We? He laughed, bitter. There is no we. You're here temporarily. When this is over, you'll leave and... What if I don't want to leave? The words hung between them, impossible and true. Julian went very still. What? Kayle's heart hammered, but she'd already jumped. Might as well fall. What if I want to stay? What if Ivy wants to stay? Kayle, she's happy here. Happier than I've ever seen her. And She took a shaky breath. I feel safe for the first time in years. Not because of the house or the guards. Because of you. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm falling for you, Julian. I'm saying I see who you really are and I'm not running. You should run. His voice was ragged. I can't be what you need. You already are. Kayle... She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the racing of his pulse beneath her fingertips. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Julian's eyes searched hers, desperate and afraid, and full of something that looked like hope. Then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he expected her to pull away. But when she didn't, when she pressed closer and kissed him back, something inside him broke. He pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other at her waist, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. The kiss deepened, turned fierce, became a conversation neither of them knew how to have with words. When they finally broke apart, Kayle was breathing hard, her forehead pressed to his. I can't promise this will work, Julian whispered against her lips. I can't promise I won't hurt you. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. His hand tightened in her hair. If anything happened to you or Ivy because of me, it won't. You can't know that. Neither can you. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. So stop trying to protect me from hypotheticals and just be with me. Julian stared at her, and slowly, so slowly, the tension in his body eased. He exhaled, long and shaky, like he'd been holding his breath for 20 years. Okay, he whispered. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her again, softer this time. Okay. They stood on the terrace for a long time after that, wrapped in each other, the cold forgotten. And inside the mansion, in her small bed surrounded by stuffed animals, Ivy slept peacefully, dreaming of pancakes and drawings and the family she was building one crayon stroke at a time. 2 months later, Kayle stood in the doorway of the West Wing and watched Julian unlock a door that hadn't been opened in 2 decades. His hand shook slightly as he turned the key. She reached out and laced her fingers through his, squeezing gently. "You don't have to do this," she murmured. "Yes, I do." His voice was steady, but she could feel the tremor running through him. "It's time." The door swung open. The room was frozen in time. Pale pink walls, now faded. A child's bed with a worn comforter printed with flowers. Shelves lined with books and toys, all covered in a thick layer of dust. And on the nightstand, a photograph. Julian at 16, skinny and haunted, holding a little girl with dark hair and his same intense eyes. Sophia. Julian stood in the doorway, his chest rising and falling with careful, controlled breaths. Kayle watched him, her heart breaking for the boy he'd been, for the guilt he'd carried all these years. "She would have loved Ivy," he said quietly. "I think she'd love what you've become too. A criminal? A protector?" Kayle moved, closer, slipping her arm around his waist. "Someone who turns his pain into purpose. Someone who saves people." Julian's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. They stood like that for a long time, bearing witness to a grief that had shaped everything he was. "I want to turn it into Ivy's room," he said finally. "Keep some of Sophia's things, the books, maybe the photograph, but make it Ivy's. Give it new life." Kaylee's throat tightened. "Are you sure?" "Yeah." He turned to her, and the look in his eyes was clear, certain. "I'm sure. About all of it." She knew what he meant, about the room, about them, about the future they were building together, piece by careful piece. "I love you," she whispered. It was the first time either of them had said it aloud. Julian's expression softened into something that took her breath away. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I love you too," he said. "Both of you. More than I thought I could love anything." Kayle kissed him, soft and lingering, and felt the last of her fear finally let go. 3 weeks later, Ivy's new room was ready. They'd painted the walls a soft lavender, hung new curtains with stars that glowed in the dark, filled the shelves with Ivy's growing collection of books and toys. But they'd kept Sophia's photograph on the nightstand and a few of her favorite books on the shelf. 2 girls, 20 years apart, sharing the same space, the same love, the same guardian. Ivy stood in the middle of the room, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's so pretty, Mr. Julian. You like it?" Julian knelt down to her level, something he did naturally now without thought. "I love it." She threw her arms around his neck, and Kayle watched his eyes close, watched him hold her daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Hey, Ivy," he said softly. "Yeah?" "How would you feel about me being around all the time? Like, officially?" Ivy pulled back, confused. "You're already here, all the time." Julian glanced at Kayle, something nervous flickering in his expression. She nodded, her heart in her throat. "I mean," Julian continued, "how would you feel about me being your dad?" Ivy went very still. Her big brown eyes searched his face, serious and thoughtful in a way that was heartbreaking for a child her age. "My real dad hurts people," she said quietly. "I know, baby." "Would you hurt me?" "Never." The word was absolute. "I would never ever hurt you. That's a promise. What about Mommy?" Never her either. My job is to keep you both safe, always. Ivy considered this, then threw her arms around him again. Okay, you can be my dad. She said it so simply, like it was the easiest decision in the world. Maybe it was. Julian's arms tightened around her, and when he looked up at Kayle over Ivy's shoulder, his eyes were wet. Kayle crossed the room and wrapped her arms around both of them, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt whole. 6 months later, they stood in front of a judge. Not for a wedding, not yet, though the ring Julian had given her sat warm and solid on her finger. For Ivy's adoption. Julian Reese, feared by half of Chicago, sat in the courtroom in a perfectly tailored suit, holding Ivy's hand, and answered the judge's questions with quiet certainty. Yes, he understood the responsibility. Yes, he was prepared to put her needs first. Yes, he would protect her, provide for her, love her unconditionally. When the judge signed the papers, making it official, Ivy looked up at Julian with absolute trust. Am I really yours now? She whispered. You were always mine, Julian whispered back. Now it's just official. Outside the courthouse, Kayle watched Julian lift Ivy onto his shoulders, watched her daughter laugh, and point at the snow falling around them, and felt a peace so profound it almost hurt. This wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was better. Because she'd learned that safety wasn't about avoiding danger. It was about finding someone who would stand between you and the darkness, no matter the cost. And Julian Rice, criminal, protector, broken man slowly becoming whole, was exactly that person. 1 year later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Kayle woke to the sound of laughter downstairs. She pulled on Julian's shirt, her favorite thing to steal, and padded down to the kitchen. Julian stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with Ivy perched on the counter beside him, both of them covered in flour. A new addition sat at their feet, a massive German shepherd named Bear, who Ivy had insisted on rescuing from a shelter. You promised you'd sleep in, Julian said without turning around. You promised not to make a mess. He started it, Ivy giggled, pointing at Julian. Traitor, Julian muttered, but there was no heat in it. Kayle leaned against the doorframe just watching them. Her family, imperfect and complicated and built from broken pieces, but hers. Julian glanced over his shoulder and caught her staring. The smile that crossed his face was soft, private, meant only for her. Come here, he said. She crossed to him, and he pulled her in with one flour-covered hand, kissing her temple. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you too. Ivy made a gagging sound. Gross. They both laughed, and Bear barked, and somewhere in the West Wing, Sophia's photograph sat on Ivy's nightstand, watching over a family that had found each other in the darkness and chosen to step into the light together. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expected. Sometimes they're the ones the world told us to fear. Sometimes they're broken, dangerous, and carrying ghosts of their own. But if you're brave enough to see past the armor, to the heart beating underneath, you might find that the scariest people are capable of the gentlest love. Kayle Morrison learned that the hard way, so did Julian Reese, and Ivy. She never doubted it for a second, because children have a way of seeing the truth adults try to hide. They see who you are when the masks come off, and sometimes that's exactly what someone needs to finally believe they deserve to be loved. If this story touched something in your heart, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What moment hit you hardest? What would you have done in Kayle's shoes? Drop your thoughts. We read every single one. And if you believe in second chances, in love that breaks through darkness, in families built by choice instead of blood, hit that like button and subscribe to Shadows of Redemption. We bring you new emotional journeys every single day, stories about broken people becoming whole, about love that refuses to give up, about hope finding a way even in the darkest places. Before you go, check out our next video or dive into our playlist for more tales of redemption, protection, and the kind of love that changes everything. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Thank you for believing that everyone, no matter how broken, how lost, how dangerous they seem, deserves a chance to find their way home. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, and remember, the strongest thing you can ever do is let someone love you, even when you don't think you deserve it. Good night.